filming for us today.
What do you feel about what you're doing?
I feel compelled to be here.
Yeah.
Because it's absolutely disgusting that someone so vulnerable can be just dropped into prison, being ignored, misunderstood. That's why I'm here. I just think it's absolutely disgraceful that the UK can treat people who are vulnerable like this. I'm not normally like this. This is not what I normally do. But I've been driven out here because it's such a huge injustice.
It is. It goes beyond race or anything.
It goes beyond race.
Yeah.
But I feel that skin colour has something to do with it as well.
It's the patterns.
Yeah.
You can't argue with the patterns, it just keeps coming up. The patterns keep coming together. It's that simple. Yeah, it really is as simple. And it doesn't matter if in some ways you could say that's not the case. The case will always have to be made because you can't trust the past. You can't trust the present. You can't trust anyone about generalisations and biases and Would you like to say a few words while you're here? No.
I don't think there's anything left to say.
I don't think there's anything left to say, it's just beautiful. Thank you.
An undercover pop. I broke mine.
Greeting comrades, we're here gathering to try and stop the deportation of Osime Brown, a young autistic, vulnerable black man who is in prison in Stoken, and they are seeking to deport him with no support given at all when he comes out of the airport. So he'll literally walk out and be homeless with no support whatsoever in Jamaica. We can't let that happen. So we're just waiting for his mum. Thank you everyone for coming. She's just down the road, she will be here soon. She's come all the way from Dudley. Yay. Yes! Do you come from Dudley?
I come from Birmingham.
Oh, there you go.
Not today.
Not today. All right, so we've got a lovely list of speakers for you. Janine, would you like to? This is Janine Booth from Neurodivergent Labour, and she would like to say something. Yeah, let me say a few words.
Can you wait till I set my camera on? Right, got ya. Go.
Okay, so yeah, as introduced, my name's Janine Booth. I'm the chair of Neurodivergent Labour, which is a recently established organisation of autistic, dyslexic, dyspraxic and otherwise neurologically atypical members of the Labour Party. And what we do is we fight against the discrimination that neurologically atypical people face in our society. We fight against it on the level of policy, we fight against it in demonstrations, etc. But we also fight against it when it impacts on individuals. And in this case it's impacted on an individual named Osime Brown. Now, the treatment of neurologically atypical people in the justice system is a source of shame. When people who are autistic, dyslexic, dyspraxic and so forth come into contact with the police and the justice system, they often become bewildered, they're often treated in a way that doesn't fit the way their brains work, they're often deliberately confused and manipulated, and they often end up getting into trouble for stuff they didn't do, or getting into trouble for stuff they did do but they were manipulated into doing in the first place. And that's why you have a disproportionate number of autistic, dyspraxic and ADHD people in the prison system and in the justice system. And it's because before the prison system kicked in, they were neglected by the education and care systems. So they ended up in a place where they ended up getting into trouble because of the rest of the opportunities that society says it offers to them weren't offered to them. I remember the General Secretary of the Prison Officers Association, the trade union for prison officers, saying at a fringe meeting at TUC a few years ago, he said 95% of the people in our care should be in the care of the National Health Service. And he's absolutely right. The vast majority of people who end up in prison should actually be getting help. They should be getting help, their health and their social needs. Osime Brown, he's not just autistic and learning disabled, he's also black and he's also an immigrant. And we know very well that the justice system is racist. We can see that from the figures about the disproportionate representation of black and minority ethnic people in arrests, in stop and search, in the prison system, etc. And in particular, the kind of conviction that Osime had. Because Osime Brown was sent to prison for not stealing a mobile phone. Okay, he was sent to prison on a joint enterprise conviction because he was with the people who stole a mobile phone. Even though a witness told the court that he had urged them not to steal the mobile phone, he was still convicted. Now, joint enterprise is an age-old principle in the law that is designed to stop people getting away with it if, you know, two or more people carried out a crime, a serious crime, and the evidence couldn't determine exactly which one of them fired the killer shot or what have you. And on that level it sounds fair enough. Since 1984, British courts have been applying joint enterprise in a really, really bad way. They've been applying it in a way that they'll convict you if they think you knew that the person was going to carry out the offence. Okay? Even if you did nothing to encourage them. Even if you actually actively discouraged them. Even actually, if you weren't even there at the time, they can still convict you. And guess what? The proportion of the British population that is black or ethnic minority is approximately 12%. Okay? The proportion of people convicted under joint enterprise who are black and ethnic minority is nearly 50%. So the application of this law, okay, is not just wrong in theory, it is racist in practice. Black and black British people are 11 times more likely to be convicted under joint enterprise than white people are. 11 times. And although these statistics have been recognised in publications like the Lamy report 3 years ago, and even, believe it or not, the Supreme Court ruled in 2016 that joint enterprise was being applied in the wrong way. But their ruling wasn't retrospective and hasn't stopped joint enterprise being used to convict people in this utterly, utterly unjust way. Osime is not just autistic and black, he's also a migrant. Came over from Jamaica when he was just 4 years old, knows nobody there, and yet the British government wants to send him back to a country where he knows no one, where he has no support systems, where there is nothing there for him. Because they do like to blame everything on migrants, don't they? And they do like to whip up hostility against people who happen to be born overseas. But you know what? Osime's been in this country since he was 4. So, even if he was a dangerous violent criminal, it was this country that made him a dangerous violent criminal. So why on earth does this country not take responsibility for him and give him the help and the care he needs? Seems to me that maybe during the COVID pandemic they've got rather over-enthusiastic about the notion of washing your hands, and they've decided to wash their hands of responsibility for this vulnerable young man. So, Osime is autistic, he's black, he's an immigrant, and he's also a working class young man. And this is what is happening in our justice system. It criminalises young, black, working class men, okay? And if you're any doubt that it's a class issue, look at what the ruling class allowed themselves to do a couple of weeks ago. Apparently, it's all right to break the law, so long as you do it in a specific and limited way. Perhaps Osime's defence solicitor should have made that point to the court. They said, well, maybe he was hanging out with some gang members, but he only did it in a specific and limited way. Maybe he'd have got off there. Only he wouldn't, would he? Because there's one rule for them and there's one rule for us. So this is about injustice on the basis of race, on the basis of nationality, on the basis of neurodivergence, and on the basis of class. Which means all those movements must come together to fight for justice for Osime Brown. The Black Lives Matter movement, the neurodivergent community, the trade union and labour movement. We must all unite. And if we do unite, if we raise our voices, we can win justice for Osime Brown. Thank you very much.
Bit louder? Okay. So hi, I'm Claire Hayes. I'm one of Osime Brown's lawyers. Thank you so much for coming out today for Osime to campaign to stop his deportation and to stop the Home Office from detaining him at the end of his prison sentence in immigration detention. I'm going to speak very briefly about the legal work that we're doing for Osime. We are representing Osime from a human rights and anti-discrimination perspective. We're obviously gravely concerned about his treatment in prison. Osime is due to be released on the 7th of October, but he's been told that he's going to be detained at the end of his sentence under immigration powers. And we intend to challenge that decision in the courts if he is not released at the end of his sentence. Many of you will be familiar with the catalogue of appalling failings in Osime's case, which it seems in all likelihood rests with the UK state. Osime's lived experiences of those injustices is something that his family are having to find the strength and courage to fight on his behalf every day. But there is also a power in Osime's story. It's a story that tells us about institutional racism in many of its forms. It tells us about neglect in terms of the neurodivergent community and intersectionality. It throws light on the systematic injustices from the education system, the criminal justice system, and the Home Office preoccupation with immigration control and removal. And that power is what has brought us together today to demonstrate against the treatment of this young black man in the criminal justice system. The neglect of disabled and neurodivergent people, in particular in places of detention, and one of the UK's open secrets, immigration detention, including for people that have spent most of their lives in the UK, people held for indefinite periods of time for the administrative convenience of the Home Office. So I'm just going to say a few more words about those themes in terms of how Osime's case shines the torch on them. Firstly, the criminalisation of young black men in prison. Over 40% of children in the youth justice system are from black and minoritised communities. 40%. Osime is a vulnerable young person. He had a very late diagnosis of autism and he is learning disabled. Prison service doesn't have reliable data on how many people in prison are disabled. Those statistics do not exist. In a prison reform trust report called No One Knows, their research showed that prisoners with learning disabilities are 5 times more likely to say that they've been subjected to the use of force, control and restraint by prison officers. Lastly, immigration detention, which in many ways strikes at the heart of institutional racism in the UK. Osime is a young person with pronounced learning disabilities that have never been properly understood by the authorities that are responsible for his care. He also has a heart condition that means that he's been advised to shield during COVID. In detention, shielding is the equivalent of solitary confinement. Solitary confinement is not acceptable for anybody who's being held as a matter of administrative convenience for the Home Office, and it is not conscionable for a young man with Osime's vulnerabilities facing deportation proceedings. So thank you so much for standing with us and Osime's remarkable mum, Joan, and family to demonstrate for Osime's freedom. That freedom is his right, it's not a privilege. Okay, I'm going to hand over to somebody else who perhaps speak from a less formal perspective than his legal team.
Osime Brown! Free Osime Brown! Free Osime Brown! Free Osime Brown! Free Osime Brown! Louder! Free Osime Brown! Free Osime Brown! Free Osime Brown! Free Osime Brown! Louder! Free Osime Brown! Free Osime Brown! Free Osime Brown! Free Osime Brown! Free Osime Brown!
So next we're going to have Christy, who's from the Women of Colour group.
Thank you very much, and I'd really like to thank the organisers for organising this, because these kind of protests are really the key to letting everybody in our community and beyond, because we don't know how far these things go, know that there is real grassroots support for Osime and all of those people who are being treated by this barbaric Home Office in this way. And particularly pay tribute, as the previous speaker did, to Osime's mother, because it is mothers who do a humongous amount of justice work, very invisible, until you see exactly what it means to defend your children from this horrendous racist system. And I wanted to connect the whole fact that the detention system is absolutely essential to the Home Office, to the government, to keep us all in our place. They want to threaten all of us if we step out of line in any way. Those who are asylum seekers that we work with, women who've escaped rape and other torture, they are all being disciplined. And they are being disciplined with the threat of deportation, the same threat that Osime faces. But one thing we know, and that is, it's not inevitable. We can stop it, and we do frequently stop it. And we stop it with the power of the movement. The Black Lives Matter movement now, which is bringing everybody up, everybody's struggle and everybody's movement, connecting with the climate justice and bringing those struggles together, because we are all in the same boat. We all face the same things unless we act together. And it is clear that we are acting together, and when we do that, we win. We have got hundreds and hundreds of women out of Yarswood Detention Centre, and now it's closed down. That has been a sustained campaign of hunger strikes, of protests, led first and foremost by those inside, and backed up by those of us outside who believe that we want a different kind of society, a society that cares about our people, a society that cares for the young black boys of today, a society that does not want them criminalised, demonised. We want to change the world, and the only way we will change the world is if we all come together. So let's keep doing what we're doing, because we do it well, and we do it publicly, and the rest of the world sees us, and we never know what kind of effect we're going to have, but it's nearly always positive. Thank you.
I've noticed that there's actually not a lot of noise here, so
When one of us chants, can we all chant? Because I'm not the only one who wants to free Osime Brown. So, let's make sure we make enough noise. Right now, yeah. Yeah. So yeah, they said who I am. So, I'm a socialist, or activist, or whatever you want to call me. And first of all, just want to say, you know, whatever I say now, it's not said as a soundbite, or for my own popularity, but because I literally mean it. And I want Osime Brown free, released. Or free, released, same thing. So, why am I here? Because I'm absolutely furious and appalled. So much, it's actually a miracle I ain't even using any swear words. Because Osime Brown has been convicted for a crime that not only did he not do, but told others not to do. And what's worse is that they accepted that he didn't commit the crime, but still want him deported to Jamaica where he has nothing. Well, I'm telling you, Osime, you don't have nothing. You have us. You've got friends, not just family, who won't stop until you're released immediately. Now, I can definitely relate to you as an autistic teenager, not getting the right amount of support wherever and whenever you need it, facing hostility from our ableist society, not fitting into peer groups that are too cliquey, and not to forget how depressing and mentally unhealthy it is living in such an unsuitable and confusing world, built around hierarchy rather than every individual's needs. Nothing much else I can directly relate to you other than being young, autistic and working class. But that's the thing, we need people on these demos campaigning at their hardest and most united for his release, however much they can relate, whatever their race, disability, gender, sexuality, religion, etc. For two major reasons. A, because we're all humans who look out for each other as a society. And B, because when you're in a battle against an enemy so much bigger, so much stronger than you, to find out you have a friend you never knew existed, that's the best feeling in the world. It really is. Because together we have power. And I'd love to know how it makes you feel in particular, Osime. Now, to finalise, because of what I last said that's so essential in winning demands like this, if we see any other protests around us, I can't see any currently, but, you know, if we see anybody else who might seem interested, or better, should be interested, now or whatever, don't tell them, go spread the word. Get them to make noise, and make noise for them. Oh, I'm just going to finish with a few chants. Black lives matter, autistic lives matter, end all discrimination, end all oppression, end all harm, social care not prisons, scrap joint enterprise, brand new justice system. Solidarity.
So our next speaker is Munya, who is from the Regularised group.
Hello everyone. Firstly, I would just like to thank the organisers of Free Osime Brown, Autistic Inclusive Needs and Neurodivergent Labour for inviting me to speak today at the Stop the Deportation of Osime Brown protest. It is great to see you all gathered here today in solidarity with this young man and his family who are experiencing so much injustice. We're witnessing an injustice perpetrated by this government and a system that is hell-bent on making the life of anyone who falls in the intersection of being black, autistic, suffering from mental health issues, being a migrant or a non-citizen, and coming across a criminal justice system as well as an immigration system built on structural racism. We know too well about the latter, as I'm from the migrant-founded and migrant-led group and campaign, Regularize. And Regularize seeks to improve the quality of life of the estimated 800,000 to 1.2 million undocumented migrants who are currently in the United Kingdom. by attaining them basic rights and a safer and more equitable path to settlement and citizenship. Regularize would like the UK government to implement a regularisation scheme for all migrants currently in the UK, regardless of their status, and for all undocumented migrants who have lived in the UK for at least 5 years to be settled permanently. And this must include all the people who have overstayed their visas, people who have never applied for asylum or visas, people who are seeking asylum with active applications, and those who had their asylum claims and other visas refused or rejected but have been living in the UK regardless of their status. This must include those who are in detention centres and those who are up for deportation. We do not discriminate based on the criminal justice system. We believe that if people have served their time and have been rehabilitated, they ought to be allowed to re-enter and participate in society because this is the humane thing to do. Deportations and detentions run counter to humanity and they must be abolished. Regularizing undocumented migrants and migrants with insecure status will ensure families, relationships and friendships are not torn apart. And regularizing undocumented migrants and migrants with insecure status will save lives and livelihoods. This policy, if enacted, will end the unnecessary and sustained suffering made worse by this pandemic for many people who have made the UK their home but currently live on the margins of society due to not having a secure leave to remain status. Today we demonstrate in solidarity with Osime Brown and his family. And truthfully, Osime Brown, having spent most of his life in the UK since the age of 4 and now at 21 years of age, is British. British except for a piece of paper that says he is. Osime Brown is being doubly punished for falling through the cracks of the legal system by stripping him of his right to remain and tearing him away from his mother and his family. I was here a few weeks ago at the same demonstration to stop the deportation of Osime Brown. And it is so harrowing now to hear of the recent news that upon his release from prison, he will be taken straight to a detention centre for a pending deportation. This is injustice after injustice after injustice. And how much pain do these people in government want to cause? How much distress do these people in the Home Office want to cause? This is torture. We learned about the Wondrous scandal not too long ago, and despite the government appearing to have acknowledged some wrongdoing on their part, they still continue deporting people whose home is the UK, even if it means endangering lives. It is a system built on cruelty, and the hostile environment introduced by the Conservative Party nearly a decade ago has made it so much worse. Why is a black male who is autistic, who is experiencing mental distress, who will soon have a spent conviction and would have served his time, seen as a threat? Why is he being deported to a country he didn't grow up in? Why is he being removed from his home, away from his family? Why is he being doubly punished? Osime Brown must stay in the UK. He must receive the support that he needs in the UK. He must be allowed to be close to his mother and his family in the UK. This is a support network, and that will also support him through his emotional growth. The UK is his home, and the government must listen to what the family are asking for. Stop the deportation. Let Osime Brown stay and drop the conviction. Osime's life matters, and it must matter to us all. We need more care, compassion and humanity in this world. And let me finish off by reminding you all, in times like these and always, we need to remember the wise words of Martin Luther King Jr. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught up in an inescapable network of mutuality tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly or affects all indirectly. It is a great reminder, and we must unite to fight against injustice anywhere it is, and we must unite to fight for the rights of those made vulnerable and those who are marginalized by these violent and oppressive systems that dehumanize our fellow human beings. Solidarity with Osime Brown and solidarity with all who need it right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mimi. Our next speaker is Dan Denfrey of the Christian community. If Dan is willing to speak.
Hi everyone. Oh, it's loud. My name's Dan. I am not an activist. This is not what I normally do. I don't normally attend protests, but something has driven me to be here today, as many of you, and that is the unjust and wrongful conviction of an innocent young man who has autism. That young man is Osime Brown. My nephew has autism. He's funny, intelligent, thoughtful, kind and loving. And it fills me with anger and dread to think, because of his vulnerabilities, he can be taken advantage of, ignored and wrongfully judged. However, this is a common occurrence for people with autism. I used to think that the UK I was born and bred in stood for integrity, understanding and an embrace of diversity. But everything about Osime Brown's case tells me otherwise. As a society, we fail more than we succeed in meeting the needs of people with autism. And disgracefully, the judicial system is no exception. Osime Brown's wrongful incarceration is a terrible outcome of these failings, and that is why I haven't been able to shake Osime's situation out of my mind. To think that a person who struggles at best to communicate and breaks down emotionally when he is ignored and vilified is then punished and reprimanded for things he hasn't committed, I would argue is torture. To be accused of a crime you did not commit, and then to be separated from the only people who understand and care for you, I would argue is torture. To be wrongfully sent to a prison where the guards have failed consistently to recognise your specific needs, and you might as well be talking to the wall, I argue that is torture. To have the things that give you some peace amongst the constant chaos of prison taken away from you, I would argue, is torture. To be denied medical treatment when you have broken bones and are in agonising pain, I would argue, is torture. Add to this the threat of being deported to a country you have no knowledge of. For the majority of us, these situations are inconceivable. But what if you have been wrongfully dropped into this dark situation and you have autism? Osime has suffered unnecessarily for far too long now. His story has been ignored for far too long. The British government have a responsibility to Osime to make sure they right the wrong of Osime's conviction before it is too late. Everyone makes mistakes, but for the UK criminal justice system to ignore their mistake is a crime in and of itself. Being autistic is not a crime. Ignorance towards autism is. Being black is not a crime. Discrimination toward people with black skin is. I implore the Home Office, I implore Priti Patel to rescind the unreasonable and irrational Justice, Robert Buckland, to stand by his words and make the changes needed so that his system does not vilify and condemn vulnerable people like Osime Brown. Free Osime Brown! 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 Free Osime Brown!
Free Osime Brown!
Free Osime Brown!
So our previous compere has popped for a coffee. So I've grabbed the microphone, which is great because it gives me the chance to introduce our next speaker, who has been a real champion of this cause and of the issues surrounding it in Parliament since being elected as the youngest MP in Parliament in last year's general election. And for her pains of standing up against torture, against abuse, against racism, was yesterday relieved of her position as a shadow PPS or whatever they call it, okay? But we're not relieving her of her position. She's still our champion. She's still our voice in Parliament. So please welcome Nadia Whittam MP.
Thank you so much, Janine, for that lovely introduction. It's been more than 6 months since this campaign was set up. And in that time, I can't imagine how excruciatingly painful and stressful and traumatic this must have been for Osime. Osime, as we've heard, is a young autistic man who spent his entire life in the UK, virtually. He was recently told on the 7th of October that he'll be moved to a detention centre awaiting deportation to Jamaica, a country that he has no memory of, that he left when he was 4 years old, where he knows no one. We have less than 2 weeks to prevent this injustice. To stop a disabled and vulnerable 21-year-old being taken away from the only country he calls home, torn away from his loving family here, and sent to a place where he has no support, where he doesn't even have anyone to collect him from the airport. There is simply no justification for a country that allows tragedies like this to happen. There's no justification for a system like that. And that's why we must do all that we possibly can to defend Osime, so that he can stay at home, so that he can get the support that he needs to live a happy and dignified life. As an MP, my promise to you is that I'll do everything in my power to fight for Osime. But Osime's story must also spark a national conversation about why our country has failed Osime and others like him so badly throughout his entire life. It should be a national scandal that black students like Osime are twice as likely to be excluded from school. That if you have special educational needs, that rises to 6 times as likely. We should be asking what went wrong in our social care system to allow a disabled teenager to move from home to home 28 times in the space of a year. And we must address the institutional racism that is rife within our criminal justice system and free all of those people who have unjustly been convicted under the Joint Enterprise Law, a law that is disproportionately used to incarcerate black men, some of whom have committed no crime other than being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And we must also tackle the shocking ableism that runs throughout the justice system, the hostility and the ignorance that neurodivergent people and also people with mental health problems face in the system. This week in Parliament, I questioned the Justice Secretary on issues relating to neurodivergent people in the criminal justice system, and he gave me his word that he will look into it, and I give you mine that I will hold him to account on that promise. And finally, of course, Osime's case exposes the sheer cruelty in our immigration system. People can be deported to places that they have no memory of, places that they couldn't possibly even remember because they've moved here as babies or young children, and places that have no regard for their welfare. If someone is black and without the right passports, the Home Office simply doesn't see them as human. We need to change this, and the fight starts here, but it doesn't end here. We will not rest until Osime Brown is free and until others like him are free and no longer experience the prejudice, the racism and the ableism within the systems of our country. My solidarity is with Osime and with Osime's fantastic, brave family who have fought for him and tirelessly led this campaign for justice. Please stay strong and know that you're not alone. Solidarity, everyone.
Nadia, just 1 minute. I'm Osime's mom, and it would be very remiss of me not to say something about this wonderful young woman, because in her very early and fresh political years, she came onto the scene a little bit like Martin Bell, a former MP, the man in the white suit, a knight in polished and bright shining armor, someone not just talking but through action, wanting to make a meaningful difference in a system that has shown itself to be wanting in so many ways. She has shown herself to be of principle far above her years. I salute you, Nadia Whittam, MP for Nottingham. Thank you for helping us.
Okay, thanks Joan and thanks Nadia. What we're going to do is we're going to have one more speech and then we're going to have a bit of a break. So if anyone wants to pop and get a coffee or mingle and talk to each other or what have you, and then we'll start again with some more speeches after a break. But one more speech. No, it's you. Oh, is it you? No. No. All right, we're going to have 2 more speeches and then we're going to have a break, okay? So, yeah.
Mine is very quick, and just to add to what Crystal said from Women of Color Global Women's Strike, we wanted to just underline the family's work, especially Osime's mom, and I know his sisters and his families, and many supporters have built this campaign, and it's so important because there are many others inside, and we're here for all of those inside, starting with Osime, but everybody else. Moms are at the forefront, but often forgotten, so we want to really big up the moms. And we also thank the MP, Nadia, because that makes such a difference when MPs come out and support, and often they don't, so thank you for your support. I just wanted to pick up a brother from the audience who said he'd not been in politics before, but he couldn't get the case out of his mind. And that's exactly the right way. That's how we come to the movement, because our family members have a disability. We're from immigrant families who are fighting to get here. We're from Windrush families. You know, our families have been the victims of police violence, and all of us come together. That's our humanity that brings us together to support each other, and that's the way that we can win. I just wanted to make one final point that Osime's family is part of the Windrush generation, and the Windrush generation have been treated absolutely abominably by this Home Office and by this government. Many people are still waiting for compensation for what they suffered under the hostile environment. And that's why they've targeted families like Osime's, because they think they can get away with it. But we're here to tell them, no way, we are keeping Osime here with us. The last point is that Britain went to the Caribbean and they invited people to come and rebuild this country after the war. People came and they built the NHS, the transport system, the post office. Many of the services we rely on were built by Caribbean people. They've robbed our countries for 500 years. The wealth is here. We have a right to be here. So we want Osime to stay, And we want papers for everybody because we've all contributed. We all have a right to be here. So we're here to collect, we're here to win, and we're here to fight. And we will keep Osime by any means necessary. Thank you.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to have one more speaker, and then we're going to have a break so you can all get a coffee and mingle and talk and what have you, and then some more speakers afterwards. So our final speaker, it's been mentioned several times here that this is a class issue. Osime's autistic, Osime's black, Osime is also working class, and that we want the working class movement to be part of this campaign to free Osime Brown. And we already have the support of one national trade union, the RMT, the Rail, Maritime and Transport Union. So our last speaker before the break is something of a legend of the RMT. So please give it up for Glenroy Watson.
Thank you, comrades. I'm going to get blamed for the delay in tea, but I hope you won't hold that against me. What a wonderful time we're in. We're our trade union tonight. Not only bring the flags and banner, but we can do face masks and visors with RMT on it. So we are there. Can I say, comrade, to actually gain the wrath of so-called Keir Starmer is a badge of honor. Somebody who's going around trying to undo or erase the work of Jeremy Corbyn, who would have been here as leader, who would have been supporting this campaign as leader. We're not going to see somebody who was afraid even to take a knee. So, well done. Don't consider that to be some kind of a shame. It's a badge of honor. Comrades, there is an aspect to all of this that I want to bring to the table. Because you see, we know the evil of the British imperial process. We know that none of this is accidental. We know that all of this has been in play throughout. When people talk about people coming here after the war, the intention was exactly this. We knew it, and we should have been more prepared, that they were still able to refer to us as low-hanging fruit. And that intention is very clear. But what are these neo-colonialist governments in the Caribbean and on the African continent doing about this open racism that is being applied to people here? Why are they going along with a young man being deported to Jamaica? And I don't think we should ignore the possibility that this collaboration has with it financial benefit for some within this government. So we must speak about corruption. We must speak about morality. We must speak about the failure of resistance. Because unless we can have those like this young lady speaking up when injustice is occurring, then we are in a situation, in essence, where we are all at the mercy of dishonest, racist, right-wing government as we currently have in this country. So let's not believe that they will stop at Osime Brown. The intention is all of us. The intention is the working class. They are picking off those they believe are more vulnerable within the working class. So we're calling on everyone to rise up and resist this. This is a naked politics that we need to be part of. And what Janine has said about our trade union movement stepping up, it's a demand that we're making to all trade union, all people, all organizations. There is an evil, dishonest action going on in the very face of us. And if we're not willing to stand up and challenge it, they will be coming for us. History has taught us they will come for one group that they think are more isolated, then they'll come for another, and by the time they come for you and I, no one will be left to defend us. So let's rise up now. Let's take the break to not only get a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, as Janine has said, but think of how we can take this forward. Think of how the organization that we belong to, whatever they are, can play a role in stopping this deportation. So comrade, we stand with you as a trade union, we stand with you as a community group, and we stand with you in any way we can to fight against injustice. Solidarity, solidarity, solidarity. Thank you.
You now exist in history.
Hello everyone, thank you for being here today. My name is Anna. I got involved with Osime's campaign through the Labour Campaign of Free movement, which was set up by Labour members, supporters and trade unionists to defend the rights of all migrants. As Labour Campaign of Free movement, we're not interested in dividing people. We don't divide people between refugees, asylum seekers and economic migrants. We don't talk about who's deserving, who's undeserving, who's an NHS worker, who's a single man on benefits, and who's in prison. We're not interested in that. We're interested in human rights. We're interested in people. Much like the Windrush scandal a few years ago, Osime's case really shows how artificial and how empty the divide is between who is a British citizen and who isn't. Having moved to the UK when he was just 4 years old, he spent his entire life here. It was the school system in the UK that failed him. It was the social care system that failed him. It was the criminal justice system that is failing him now. He grew up here, his family is here. There's nothing that makes him not a British citizen other than his passport. But now he's facing deportation to a country he has no links to. That is a story that is now very familiar. This time a month ago, we heard about the death of Mercy Beguma, a young asylum seeker mom who was found dead next to a crying baby. As an asylum seeker, she didn't have the right to work. She could not access benefits and no recourse to public funds. In the 6th biggest economy in the world, she died of starvation and destitution, just because of what her passport said. Much like Osime, her entire life was in the UK. And it's not just that. We know that the hostile environment affects not just migrants, but British people of colour as well. It is a way of artificially determining who really counts as British, so that this government can divide and rule. We know that divide and rule is a favourite tactic of the powerful, because the working class is stronger united in struggle than divided by nationality. At the end of the day, working class people have the same interests and face the same problems. We all deal with insecure housing, low-paid work. Whether we're British or not, we deal with this absolute state of the school system, which Osime went through, the underfunding of the NHS. Why should we have different rights? People who live here belong here, and they belong fully in our society and deserve to be treated as equal citizens, with full rights to access the NHS for free and other public services, with the right to work legally, to join a trade union and defend themselves, with the right not to be deported or to be in prison just because of where they are born. And if they end up in a criminal justice system, they don't deserve to be punished twice, once through prison and once through deportation. A crime like stealing a phone should not merit a life sentence. At the end of the day, we're all in this together. We need to stand in solidarity with each other. We need to fight with each other. So I want to extend my solidarity to Osime Brown, his fantastic family that has been leading this campaign, because Black Lives Matter, Migrant Lives Matter, Disabled Lives Matter, and Osime's life matters. Osime Brown is here to stay, and we are with you.
So now Joan will speak. Okay. Joan is Osime's mum.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joan Martin, and I'm Osime's mother. And it is very hard for me to do this, but I have to do it for my son, for my baby, because what's happening to him is not right. But our government, its departments, an institution that was set up to protect us, its citizens from harm, so often fail the ones that should serve. So from our school system, social services, the criminal justice system, and the police, for many vulnerable people, those institutions are not seen as protecting, but have become punitive, insensitive, detached, abusive, and hostile to those they should protect. They often act with impunity. My son, Osime Brown, who you may know is autistic, he has suffered at every stage of his life and failed sequentially by each institution. In school, when he needed care because of his emotional difference from his peers, instead of addressing his needs and challenges, they resorted to the easy option of punish, isolation, ridiculing, detention, and exclusions. Social service removed him from my home without my consent, without giving due regards to his special needs, due to, they said I'm too strict. Deny him quality care, destabilize and confuse his vulnerable mind by moving him from one resident to the next in excess of 28 times in a single year, denying him his mother access to him and denying him all his cultural needs. The police fabricated evidence against him that created their own narrative. And even though his peers informed them and the court that Osime had nothing to do with this misdemeanor or youthful antics, they singled him out as the mentally most challenged black child in their numbers, to be the only one criminalized and receive incarceration. Osime Brown is a black 21 autistic man who in 2018 was sentenced to 5 years in jail, terms upon a joint enterprise law over a theft of a mobile phone, and a witness on the crime scene confirmed to the police and Osime that Osime was trying to stop the robbery, but despite his autism, learning disabilities, and vulnerabilities, he was the only one imprisoned. The solicitor assigned to represent him, the best way they could do was to advise little boy lost to plead guilty or say yes on some of the things he did not do. Even since they have been hell-bent on trying to get him deported to a country he left at 4 years old. Having zero connection or recollection of the place out there, he is so unconscious of what's happening to him that he asks me, "Mom, when they deport me to Jamaica, which bus will I have to catch to come and visit you in Dudley?" The very judge was so hell-bent on deporting him to such an extent that he arrogantly refused to even read my son's psychological report, indicating that that would not make any difference. In prison, his experience worsened to such an extent that he has developed a condition, resulting in several hospital visits, significant and severe self-harming, ending up on suicide watch. In prison, he has been bullied by staff, deprived of food, in one instance alone, for over 34 hours. The system solution to deal with their uncomfortable problem and responsibilities is to offload them by issuing the autistic child with a letter stating that on the 7th of October, he will be taken to a detention center in preparation for deportation to Jamaica. This is a snippet of the brutality that my family has experienced from institution with the most elaborate good practices and quality of service written on paper. As a black woman with an autistic child, over the past years we have come to realize that to be black and falling into the iron grip of those institutions can be a life sentence of grief, rejection, and pain. So this is a summary of my son's complexity. Osime is autistic, dyslexic, learning disabled, and suffer from severe PTSD from his time in care and in prison. He also suffered from a heart condition that requires several surgeries. And what should not have been an issue, but sadly, we have come to realize that it is. He is a black male. Without the kind and unrelenting support of individuals far and wide and organizations, we would have already been crushed by the weight and cold indifference of the system and institutions. Thank you all for coming today and for listening to us. Solidarity, please continue to support us. My son cannot go to Jamaica. I would like to say to the Home Office, if you have a heart, help my son. We need justice. They have took him away from me before. Please do not take him away from me again. Thank you.
Our final speaker is Cameron from Global Justice Rebellion.
Hello everyone, I'm a bit knackered, so I hope I can do this issue justice. So first thing I wanted to say is that I'm from a group called Global Justice Rebellion and we're environmentalists. Yet we're here today because environmentalists across the world should realise that migrants' rights are a cornerstone of the future that we want to build. And so we need to be here to protest against deportations like this and the brutal attacks on innocent people across the country in the name of defending borders. So in this country, in the last few months, we had desperate refugees from Syria, from Afghanistan, from Iran, from Iraq, on boats trying to cross the English Channel to come to this country, and they were met with the words of ministers decrying their actions, calling it illegal, and asking to send in the Navy to stop it. We have a detention system in this country where tens and tens of thousands of people whose only crime is not being what the government deems as a necessary migrant, they're locked up Sometimes in solitary confinement, they're being kept in brutal conditions. We also have a deportation system where the government charters entire flights in order to send people back to other countries. Why? Why is it like this? The truth is, it isn't like this for everyone. So, whilst trillions of dollars in investments and over $100 billion in arms freely flow across borders every year, the people these investments exploit and the entire societies these arms destroy can't. Borders exist because they make the rich richer and the poor poorer, or they wouldn't be here at all. Every year, a net total of $2 trillion flows from the global south to the global north. That's $2 trillion more than any aid or any remittances that come back every single year, because borders privilege transnational corporations. And not only is the global south where the rich take their money, but it's also where they forge their own methods of exerting power. From austerity to massive data collection to Cambridge Analytica's first attempt to swing elections, these things shocked the global north, but it had been tried and tested on our friends in the global south long before. All the benefits from these systems go to the top 1%. So I think it's time that we realise across borders that we all suffer under the same system and the same exploiters. Maybe a lot of us do understand that, but what is often missed is that borders, such as those that the Home Office manage here, play a huge role. Your nationality determines half your income. Borders prevent people from equalising that playing field. The wealth of the world is extracted and stored in Western nations. Borders stop countries taking back what's rightfully theirs. Borders make it so that the farmer in Brazil or the precarious food delivery driver in London don't realise they are being exploited by the same people. Borders make it so that we are tricked into believing our safety and our security and our access to food and our access to wealth has to come at the expense of another. And the collateral damage of that are families like those of Osime Brown. But the truth is, we're only as safe as our siblings in the global south are. These two fights, north and south, for security and dignity will always be the same fight. And so if dividing us is weakness, then uniting us is strength. And I just want to end on something I think it's important to mention. I think other speakers mentioned this as well. This is all about working class solidarity.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joan Martin, and I'm Osime's mother. And it is very hard for me to do this, but I have to do it for my son, for my baby. Because what's happening to him is not right. But our government, its departments and institutions that were set up to protect us, its citizens from harm, so often fail the ones that should serve. So from our school system, social services, the criminal justice system and the police, for many vulnerable people, those institutions are not seen as protecting, but have become punitive, insensitive, detached, abusive and hostile to those they should protect. They often act with impunity. My son Osime Brown, who you may know is autistic, he has suffered at every stage of his life and failed sequentially by each institution. In school, when he needed care because of his emotional difference from his peers, instead of addressing his needs and challenges, they resorted to the easy option of punish, isolation, ridiculing, detention, and exclusions. Social service removed him from my home without my consent, without giving due regards to his special needs, due to, they said I'm too strict. Deny him quality care, destabilize and confuse his vulnerable mind by moving him from one resident to the next in excess of 28 times in a single year, denying him his mother access to him and denying him all his cultural needs. The police fabricated evidence against him that created their own narrative. And even though his peers informed them and the court that Osime had nothing to do with this misdemeanor or youthful antics, they singled him out as the mentally most challenged black child in their numbers, to be the only one criminalized and receive incarceration. Osime Brown is a black 21 autistic man who in 2018 was sentenced to 5 years in jail, terms upon a joint enterprise law over a theft of a mobile phone, and a witness on the crime scene confirmed to the police and the scene that Osime was trying to stop the robbery, but despite his autism, learning disabilities, and vulnerabilities, he was the only one imprisoned. The solicitor assigned to represent him, the best way they could do was to advise little boy lost to plead guilty or say yes on some of the things he did not do. Even since they have been hell-bent on trying to get him deported to a country he left at 4 years old. Having zero connection or recollection of the place out there, he's so unconscious of what's happening to him that he asks me, "Mom, when they deport me to Jamaica, which bus will I have to catch to come and visit you in Dudley?" The very judge was so hell-bent on deporting him to such an extent that he arrogantly refused to even read my son's psychological report, indicating that that would not make any difference. In prison, his experience worsened to such an extent that he has developed heart condition, resulting in several hospital visits, significant and severe self-harming, ending up on suicide watch. In prison, he has been bullied by staff, deprived of food, in one instance alone for over 34 hours. The system solution to deal with their uncomfortable problem and responsibilities is to offload them by issuing the autistic child with a letter stating that on the 7th of October he will be taken to a detention center in preparation for deportation to Jamaica. This is a snippet of the brutality that my family has experienced from institutions with the most elaborate good practices and quality of service written on paper. As a black woman with an autistic child, over the past years we have come to realize that to be black and falling into the iron grip of those institutions can be a life sentence of grief, rejection, and pain. So this is a summary of my son's complexity. Osime is autistic, dyslexic, learning disabled, and suffers from severe PTSD from his time in care and in prison. He also suffers from a heart condition that requires several surgeries. And what should not have been an issue, but sadly, we have come to realize that it is. He is a black male. Without the kind and unrelenting support of individuals far and wide and organizations, we would have already been crushed by the weight and cold indifference of the system and institutions. Thank you all for coming today and for listening to us. Solidarity, please continue to support us. My son cannot go to Jamaica. I would like to say to the Home Office, if you have a heart, help my son. We need justice. They have took him away from me before. Please do not take him away from me again. Thank you.